trendsetters, pioneers, trailblazers. Whatever you call them, they took the initiative to carve out spaces where none existed before for people with disabilities to become adaptive athletes. They created a movement that thrives to this day in the hearts of adaptive athletes everywhere. From weekend warriors to club athletes to decorated Paralympians. They are the medical professionals, the adaptive athletes, the dedicated volunteers who work tirelessly to help everybody experience the power of sport. They are the National Adaptive Sports Hall of Fame. Join us as we honor their contributions to the movement by sharing their stories. Jean Driscoll is an 8-time Boston Marathon champion and 4-time Paralympian who became one of the most dominant wheelchair racing athletes in history. Born with spina bifida, Jean discovered adaptive sports in high school and went on to compete at the University of Illinois, where she developed into an elite racer under coach Marty Morris. She won the Boston Marathon 7 consecutive times from 1990 to 1996 and claimed her 8th title in 2000. A competitor in the Paralympic Games from 1988 through 2000, she earned medals of every color across her career and closed out her final Paralympic appearance with a marathon gold in Sydney. Let's chat with her. So, Jean, I know that you kind of began competing in the mid-1980s. I'd love to learn about what the landscape was like when you first got into adaptive sports.
Well, I was born with spina bifida and grew up walking with below the knee braces and didn't know anything about wheelchair sports. And then my freshman year in high school, I had a bike accident, spent a year in a body cast, missed a lot of school and ended up changing schools because I was at a private all girls college prep school, and it was going to require me to go an extra year because they had 26 credit hours to graduate, but the public school only had 18, and I figured out I could still graduate on time if I went to the public school. So I get to the public school, and as a result of all the surgeries, I had to walk on crutches and use a wheelchair for long distances. And at the new high school, there was another kid with spina bifida who used a wheelchair and said, "Hey, how would you like to come and play wheelchair soccer?" I crinkled my face. I'm like, "Wheelchair soccer? How do you play soccer? You need your legs." And so for the whole school year, 82, 83, he was trying to talk me into going to a wheelchair soccer practice in my hometown of Milwaukee. Finally, to get him off my back in May of my junior year, I thought, I'll go to this soccer practice. I know I'm not going to like it, but at least I'll get him off my back. And I went to the soccer practice and chairs were crashing and banging and bodies were flying. And I thought, this is sport. It's not hokey like I thought it was going to be. And so I have that young man to thank, and my whole world opened up because not only did I play wheelchair soccer, but I found wheelchair basketball and wheelchair softball and tennis and racing and square dancing. You know, you swing your partner and you really get going fast. So it just, I'm one of 5 kids. I've always been competitive, but because of the spina bifida, I could never keep up with everybody. I could hit a softball, but I was so slow going around the bases. What would have been a home run for some kids, I barely got to first base. So it was always frustrating. So when I started engaging in sport, I felt myself blossom. Without going into a lot of detail, ultimately, I found the University of Illinois. There was a wheelchair basketball coach named Brad Hedrick who came to Milwaukee and was speaking at a wheelchair sports workshop on a Saturday. And later that day, he saw me playing an exhibition game of wheelchair soccer and came up to me and gave me his spiel. "How would you like to be a member of the University of Illinois women's wheelchair basketball team?" I listened politely, but I declined because Illinois and Wisconsin don't like each other. Chicago and Milwaukee, the radio personalities cut down each other all the time. There was no way I was going to Illinois. But he kept sending letters and he kept calling. And I thought, wow, somebody wants me on their team. I was I was the kid who was always last, picked at recess for physical education classes, and somebody actually wanted me on their team. So I thought, I'll go down to Illinois. I'll complete my degree and hightail it back to Wisconsin. And that is not what happened. I came to Illinois in the fall of 87. I was a dual sport athlete. Not only did I play basketball, but I got involved in the track and road racing program. Um, Don and Michael Vandalo, who lived in Wisconsin and were helping me with track before I came to Illinois, were coaching me in track and swimming. But when I got to Illinois, it just went to a whole nother level. And for the first 2 years that I was at Illinois, the racing coach, Marty Morris, was trying to talk me into doing a marathon. And like, who wants to do a 26.2 mile race? Not me.
Willingly.
Willingly. So after 2 years, just like that kid in high school, I thought the only way I'm going to get my coach off my back is to do a marathon. One marathon. I said
Mhm.
I would do one marathon. I did the Chicago Marathon in the fall of 89. I ended up qualifying for Boston. Did not want to go do another marathon, even if it was the Boston Marathon. But Marty Morris, the racing coach, was from the South Shore of Boston. There was no getting out of it.
Oh, yes.
It really is amazing how things progress because from there, I went out to Boston. It's my senior year in college. I'm yelling at my coach under my breath. Didn't want to be there. Champaign, Illinois is as flat as a pancake, and
Hmm.
Boston is famous for its hills. And
Hmm.
I didn't think I was going to get through the marathon course. And amazingly, 26.2 miles later, not only did I win my first Boston Marathon, but I broke the world record by almost 7 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, you mentioned obviously a number of sports that you played growing up. Had you done any racing prior to going to the University of Illinois?
Well, yeah. So through the wheelchair sports community in Milwaukee, the wheelchair sports in which I was involved had a program through the Milwaukee Public Schools Division of Recreation.
Mm.
And so one of the guys with whom I played wheelchair soccer, had a spinal cord injury, and he had made a racing chair out of PVC pipe. And there were local road races, and so he let me borrow this chair out of PVC
Mm.
pipe. It was a whole lot faster than my everyday chair, and I had done some 5Ks in my everyday chair, and that was not fun. Couldn't go as fast as the guys that were in the racing chairs. So yes, I did some racing. In 1986, a sponsor named Jim Dursey, who owned a sign company in Milwaukee, paid for my first racing chair, a $2,000 racing chair, bought
Mm.
my first plane ticket to my first national level road race, the New Times Phoenix 10K in Phoenix, Arizona, which was November of 86.
Mm.
And then the following summer, I was on the U.S. developmental track and field team that went to Stoke Mandeville. So in the summer of 87, I went to Stoke Mandeville, and Marty Morris, who was the Illinois coach, happened to be the coach of the U.S. developmental team. So I got to know him a little bit, but then I came to Illinois in August of 87.
Yeah. And as being part of the University of Illinois, I mean, obviously it's an iconic program and a trailblazing and pioneering program in the collegiate adaptive sports space. What what was it like being part of, and you have to tell me what this means, the infamous Giz Kids?
Well, the Giz Kids were no longer the name. By the time I got here, we were able to use the Fighting Illini just like all of the non-disabled athletes.
Okay.
But um, back in the early days, the University of Illinois men's able-bodied team were called the Whiz Kids. And Tim Nugent, who talk about a pioneer.
Hmm.
Do you know that name, Tim
Oh,
Nugent?
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was the one who created the first collegiate wheelchair sports programs back in the late 40s. Um, since the able-bodied team was the Whiz Kids, he uh, called the wheelchair basketball team, the Giz Kids, and it came from the gizmos um, on on leg bags,
Oh, okay.
which is kind of a funny story. But
Hmm.
I heard Tim Nugent tell that story many times.
Hmm. Wow. And, did you know, obviously you were being hounded by the coach. Did you know, though, when you said yes to the University of Illinois that you were becoming part of an iconic program at that time?
I didn't know anything about the history. I didn't know
Hmm.
anything about Tim Nugent, who, by the way, grew up in Milwaukee, went to a rival high school.
Ah,
Granted, he was closer to my grandparents' age, but I had no idea about the history. I knew Illinois was a great program and they had a lot of really good athletes, but I didn't know anything about the history. And boy, at this point in life, I'm intensely proud to be part of its history now.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you mentioned obviously the Boston Marathon. I believe you had what, 8 straight victories at least?
Seven straight
Okay.
with five back-to-back world records.
Wow.
Well, they don't call them world records because it's a net decrease in elevation. So they were world best times. But for the first 5 years that I went to Boston, I lowered that mark every single time
Mm.
and got the bonus money for the world best times and the
Uh-huh.
course records. I went on to win it seven in a row. And then so that was 1990 through 1996. In 1997, one of my rear wheels got caught in a trolley track and I flipped. I still finished second on a flat tire, but
Oh no.
I didn't. That was the first time I didn't win. And then the next year, Louise Savage from Australia beat me in a final sprint by about 2/10 of a second. And then in 99, she beat me by in a final sprint by half a second. And so when I went in 2000, I hadn't won in 3 years. Um, and so now I was the underdog again. And that's a whole lot easier
Hmm.
than being the front, the favorite and the front
Yeah, and
runners.
having the target on your back, right?
Exactly. So I got number eight in 2000. I knew I was going to be retiring after the 2000 Sydney Games. And so it just was a dream that year.
And even today, and maybe not today, well, even today, but obviously even just up until recent times, there have been races, like the Boston Marathon, but not the Boston Marathon, that, still haven't fully incorporated, an adaptive division. And so what was it like in that time period in the late 80s, early 90s to be able to have the opportunity to even one, qualify and participate, but also two, win prizes and or win prize money just like everybody else?
Yeah. Um, I I knew how special it was to be able to have opportunities that athletes, even a generation before me, did not have.
Mm,
One of the things about being at the University of Illinois is there used to be a banquet in November every year. And when Tim Nugent got the microphone, you knew it was going to be a 45-minute history lesson. And, as a 20, 21-year-old, you're like, oh gosh,
uh-huh.
not again.
Right.
But at this stage, where some of the younger athletes are not as grateful and feel entitled to certain things, I think it was really important for Tim to keep reminding everybody where the program had come from. So um, there were races. The New York City Marathon did not have a wheelchair division
Hmm.
during my racing career. That is the one marathon I really wish I could have done because it's really hilly and hilly courses were my specialty.
Uh-huh.
I had a max bench press of 210 and a body weight of 111. So almost twice my body weight.
Mm-hmm.
And so I motored up the hills better than anybody in the world. And I really wish that I could have done the New York City Marathon. But other than that, my uh, people don't believe this, but I'm an onstage extrovert, but an offstage introvert.
Mm.
And now that I'm a manager, I can lean into conflict a little better. But 30 years ago, I was not going to be the one to carry the shield and armor into battle. And I thought if they don't want the wheelchair athletes there, I'm going to go where they do welcome us. And now I have friends who bucked the system, and thank goodness they did, because if they hadn't bucked the system, I wouldn't have had the opportunities that I did.
Mm.
Tim Nugent absolutely bucked the system his entire career, making sure that people understood, on a certain level, disabled athlete is an oxymoron. You might be an athlete with a disability who, uses a wheelchair or prosthetics, but you're an athlete first.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you're nodding knowingly, but a lot of people still don't understand that.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Even today,
think
yes.
success in sport, one of the greatest things that comes from success in sport is having a platform on which to do a little disability education, but also tell some really good sports stories.
And I loved your on stage extrovert versus in on versus on not on
Off
stage off
stage.
stage introvert, because that's kind of how I am too, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
my general personality as well. And so for someone who hosts a podcast, almost on a regular basis and everything else.
But I
Um,
believe it, Johnny Carson, after he retired, he was a recluse. I
mhm.
mean, he could visit with anybody, but off stage, he didn't visit with anybody.
Right, right. And you mentioned in '87 the Stoke Manville Games. That's a name that, like, obviously a lot of athletes today don't even recognize, that name or that history. So I'd love to just get your insights and perspective on, that event, if you will.
Sure. Years ago, Stoke Mandeville is where all the wheelchair athletes went for international competition. I don't know if it was the World War II era athletes who came back with injuries and really laid the foundation for the wheelchair sports. But I know Stoke Mandeville is a place where folks went who were athletes in the 60s, maybe
Hmm.
in the 50s. I don't know the history well enough. Um, I didn't know anything about Stoke Mandeville being a military hospital at one time. And so I went there just looking for an opportunity to compete.
Hmm.
And although I was grateful, I think I was in awe of everything. I couldn't believe how I went from being worst to first. I won several gold medals at Stoke Mandeville on that developmental team. And made lots of friends. It's still, I tell people don't pinch me because I don't want to wake up. I'm still in awe of everything that transpired. We slept in dorm-like accommodations. There was a row of beds. Have you been to Stoke
I have
Mandeville?
not, no.
Yeah, so you just had a row of cot-like beds in a room, and the men were on one side, and the women were on the other side, and some of those guys snored really loudly. Uh, but the track you could push to the track. Every country had their own tent, as it were. So there was the U.S. tent where I remembered storing my racing chair. Um, and again, Jim Dursey, the guy that owned the sign company, is the one who made it possible for me to go to the Stoke Mandeville games. I think it was a $1,200 trip, and there's no way my family
Mm,
could have paid that kind of money. So there are a lot of people who saw something special in me and invested in me, and it just melts my heart because I wouldn't have had the opportunities that I did without having people come into my life and provide those opportunities financially, through coaching, Brad Hedrick in basketball, Marty Morris in track and road racing. There are just a lot of people who have made me who I am.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And we never forget how those other folks have impacted our own individual successes, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And, following obviously the Stoke Mandeville Games in 87, you went on to compete in medal in 88, 92, 96, and 2000, like you said, the last one that you knew you were going to retire from. So, of those four Paralympic Games, is there a moment that, I won't ask what your favorite is unless you have one, but is there a moment that's of those four that's more iconic to you?
Well, in 1988, I was still pretty green, and I didn't realize what a big deal it was that I was on the U.S. team. I knew it was a big deal. I just didn't really understand where the adapted sports movement had come from and where it was then. 92, I did not have a very good games there. I got one gold medal. I think it was in a relay. I had peaked earlier before we got to Barcelona,
Mhm.
and it was really a disappointing experience. 1996, competing in your own home country, there is
Right.
nothing like it. I just got chills saying that, remembering it. The International Olympic Committee has exhibition events that they hold in the Olympic and Paralympic Games.
Mhm.
And Juan Antonio Samaranch was the president of the International Olympic Committee. He loved the wheelchair events. And so, starting in 88 and ending in 2004, there were two wheelchair exhibition events at the Olympic Games, an 800-meter event for women and a 1,500-meter event for men. I qualified to do that event in 92 in Barcelona and
Mm.
won a silver medal. And I started to taper off after that, which is why the Paralympic Games was not so good for me. But in 96 in Atlanta, I got a silver medal. And for somebody who had become a long distance athlete, an 800-meter silver medal was something is something I cherish. But being in my home country with my home crowd for that Olympic exhibition event, I had family who caravanned from Wisconsin in a red minivan, a white minivan, and a blue minivan. There was a huge crowd. They stayed at Barry Ewing's home. Barry owns Eagle Sports
Oh,
Chairs.
yes.
He
Oh my
built all of
goodness.
my racing chairs, my everyday chairs, and he let everybody stay at his place. And it was a rainy day for that Olympic exhibition event, but it was so glorious having everybody there. Was people from Wisconsin, people from Champaign, Illinois, um, and then coming back for the Paralympic Games, I got to do my core events, the events in which I was strongest, and I got medals of every color. I tell people I got the whole set. And the same thing in Sydney. Sydney did such a good job with the Paralympic Games. I missed the wheelchair exhibition events, qualifying by 18/100ths of a second.
Mm.
But I
Oh,
was there for the Paralympic Games, and it was glorious. They just did such a good job, and I won that marathon. It was the last gold medal given in Sydney before the closing ceremonies.
ah,
And so I got to go out on top in a lot of
literally.
different ways. And people are like, do you still do marathons? No, I am keeping that moment sacred. And I don't have, I lost the fire to train the way you need to train in
Hmm.
order to be competitive, and I just can't do it for fun.
Right. And I totally understand that. I'm kind of there as well. For my sports days are, I do some fun things like recreationally, but my sporting fun days are over.
Right, right.
And and you talked a little bit about you talked about obviously wheelchair racing as well as like road racing. What is, I mean, like, what do you need to do from a training perspective differently to be able to compete at an elite level in both of those activities? Because they're
Yeah.
different, right?
Well, I think you're making a differentiation between wheelchair track
Yes.
and wheelchair road racing. They complement one another, but they are different events. On the track, uh, it's the same events that running athletes do. It's the 100 meter, 200 meter,
Hmm.
400 meter, 800 meter, 1500 meter, 5000 meter, and back in my day, we also did a 10,000 meter event. Now they don't offer the 10,000 meter event, at least for women. I'm not sure if the men still do it, but so I still have the world record for the 10,000 meter event because they don't run it anymore.
There you go. All records are meant to be broken, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Uh, well, I had the best time as a women's wheelchair athlete on the Boston Marathon course for 21 years until somebody did it a little faster for me, a little faster than me.
Hmm.
But for 21 years,
Hmm.
I had that distinction. Again, it's something I'm very proud of, particularly with the developments in glove technology and chair technology, racing frame technology. So on the track, you do a lot of intervals and you go around and around in a circle and you fight the wind halfway and you get the tailwind the other half. Well, I would say you're probably dealing with a crosswind too, but you have a cross tail and a cross head, and then you have
Hmm.
the direct head and the direct tail. Out on the road, we do interval work too, but typically the mileage is much greater. We would go out on the country roads here in Champaign County and might do an 18-mile push. That includes warm up and cool down. As we were getting closer to Boston before our taper, we might do a 22 or 23-mile push and then start to taper down. I've never done 20 miles on a track.
Hmm.
Mostly, and when I was training for the 10,000 meter event, certainly I was doing workouts that entailed longer workouts, but we didn't do the mileage on the track like we did on the road. But like I said, they were complementary. And then we would do cross training with hand cycles, mostly in the off season, like in the fall season where you wanted to maintain some level of fitness, but uh, you didn't have to be sharp. And for me, I planned everything around the Boston Marathon. That was the pinnacle
Hmm.
around the rest of the racing schedule. My best races were in April and May, although I did very well at the Peachtree in July on the 4th of July. But so did I answer your
Yeah,
question?
absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
That's great. And then I know that you mentioned, that obviously early on that you did some races in your everyday chair. And I know athletes today, probably couldn't fathom that. So I would love to learn or just hear your insights in terms of what do you think is the biggest difference today in the adaptive sports and parasport movement versus, when you were involved in the mid 80s up to 2000-ish.
There are a lot more opportunities these days, a lot more opportunities for competition, a lot more sports
Hmm.
that provide those opportunities. Um, I was one of the first female wheelchair athletes to get sponsorship. I had a business manager who negotiated a sponsorship with Ocean Spray,
Hmm.
and it helped that they had cranberry bogs in Wisconsin. um, but their main headquarters are in Plymouth, Massachusetts, and so they knew my name. And
Hmm.
one of the employees handed me a card and said, "Contact me." And so I gave it to the business manager, and so from '96 to 2000, Ocean Spray was all over my uniforms. I had stickers on my helmet.
Hmm.
Lighthouse Foods was one of my sponsors for a few years. United Airlines was a sponsor. Eagle Sports Chairs, that was an equipment sponsor. I
Hmm.
never had to pay for a racing chair. Barry took care of all of that. If I had a flat tire, he sent extra tires. I didn't have to pay for an everyday chair. So that was invaluable sponsorship. That in some ways, I guess, if he wanted to add everything up, it could be measurable, but for me, it was immeasurable,
Right, right.
knowing that he was there. So whether it's the money that athletes are earning right now, oh my gosh, at the Boston Marathon, they don't even have to break a world record, and they are earning the same money that the able-bodied athletes are who win.
Hmm.
That was never the case. So I'm really excited for how adapted sports have evolved, and the recognition that this is sport. These are sports. These are athletes who are training as hard as everybody else. And again, a disabled athlete is an oxymoron. These
Hmm.
are athletes who are doing more than what the average Joe can do.
Absolutely. And then finally, kind of taking that question a little bit differently, and what do you think is still the biggest challenge or obstacle facing the adaptive sports movement today?
I think attitudes, we have come a long way, particularly since World War II, when a lot of the adapted sports started to be created. There are still attitudes and people. My dad's cousin wrote a family history, and he talked about me being in the Special Olympics.
Mm,
And I don't have a gripe against Special Olympics. Everybody, the fact that there's an opportunity for everybody to participate and compete is
right.
great.
Hmm.
But the mission of Special Olympics is different than the mission for U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee. But not everybody understands that. And my medals, I didn't get a medal because I finished. I got a medal because I finished first. And I got certificates for breaking world records
Hmm.
because I did something nobody else had done before. Again, I tread very carefully in this space because I have friends who benefit greatly from Special Olympics. I have volunteered at Special Olympics events, and the joy those athletes have, in some cases, far exceeds my joy because sometimes the, they have the right attitude.
Hmm.
I was pretty intense when I was competing, and it wasn't always fun. But for a lot of people, it's fun, and that's part of the joy in our lives.